All variables that you've seen in the previous video had a primitive data type, meaning they were either integers, doubles, floats, strings, or booleans. Let's have a look at the first compound type, namely arrays. Arrays are variables that store a fixed length list of values which have the same data type. So imagine you're counting the number of times each letter of the alphabet appears in a given text. You could use an integer variable to store the number of A's, another integer variable to store the number of B's, and so on. But this, of course, wouldn't be very economical in terms of the identifiers that you're using. Instead, what you can do is you can use an array that is a single identifier that points to a list of, let's say, 26 different integer variables. So let's do this. Let's say we have an identifier called count that is an array of length 26 and it has type integer array. And the type integer array is written int for integer followed by square brackets to denote that it is an array type. You can access the individual variables simply by the name of the array followed by the index, which is the position in this list, given in square brackets. So the first variable is count in square brackets 0, and the last one is count in square brackets 25. And these expressions can be used just like any other integer variable in your source code. There's an array type for any type that is already declared. For example, if you have a type called x, then there is a corresponding array type x followed by square brackets. This means that arrays are not primitive but compound, meaning they are structured and they make no sense on their own. They have to be consisting of other already defined types. Examples are, integer types, just as we've seen just before, or Boolean types. You would write it Boolean followed by square bracket, and so on. Now, declaring an array variable is done in exactly the same way as you would declare any other variable. Namely, you say the type followed by the name of the identifier, and then because it's a declaration statement, it has to be ended in a semicolon. And of course, you would use array types here. Instantiating arrays is a different matter because, as I mentioned before, arrays are fixed length lists. So this means whenever you create a new array, you need to tell the compiler how long this list is supposed to be. And for that, you use a special statement using the new keyword new. And the way it looks like, you would write new followed by the name of the base type followed by the length of the array that you're creating in square brackets. For example, if you're creating an array of doubles of length 200, you would write new double in square bracket 200. Similarly, you can do the same for Boolean types, of course. Truth values, a new Boolean in square bracket 18. This will create a length 18 list of Booleans. Finally, what you put into these square brackets when you create a new array is any expression that evaluates to an integer. So you could have, say, an integer variable alphabet size, initialize it to value 26, and then in line 4 here, you would create a new integer array of length 26 by referring to the current value of this variable alphabet size. Two brief remarks on arrays. Firstly, you can always access the declared length of an array using the attribute called length. To do this, you can just use the identifier followed by a dot and then length. This is in fact an integer variable that contains the declared length of the array count. And secondly, just to come back to our example with counting the letters, you can refer to the number of A's in our example by just using the identifier of the array, and then the first integer variable in this list is the one that is addressed by its index 0. So count 0 is counting the number of A's, and similarly the number of C's could then be the current content of this array at position with index 2. Finally, let me mention that it's quite easy to define multidimensional arrays. Remember that every type has an associated array type, and this includes array types themselves. For example, you may want to represent a chessboard as an 8x8 two-dimensional integer array, and you can do this like this here. On the left-hand side, I declare an array called board to be of type array of integer. So it would be written int followed by square brackets, square bracket. And on the right-hand side, I initialize it to the required dimension. Of course, you could also use the literal notation that I've just introduced. This is what the example does here. It creates and initializes an 8x8 integer array, all zeros.